All right, everybody, welcome back to Nebraska High School Game Day. It's been a while. We haven't been doing much basketball coverage. Our last show, I believe, was actually the semifinal show for football because I kind of got sick right in time for the state championship. But we are back. We are doing things over Zoom to kind of talk about boys basketball in Class A. I'm John Willis, joined alongside Jaden Taylor. Jaden, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. It's fun to have a snow day tomorrow. Fun to just kick back and maybe watch the basketball if there's any basketball tonight and see what's going on for later. But we've had a really good season and can't wait for more.
Well, yeah, so let's kind of dive into it. Currently looking at the NEB Preps top 10. So I mean, I it's kind of like how we saw in football. How Westside and Bell West we always talked about were just separated from everybody else, and I think we have that here again with Miller North and Bellevue West.
Yeah, I mean that back and forth just awe-inspiring offenses that both those teams have, as well as some great defenses. And these are some of the top recruits that we've ever had in the state of Nebraska. I mean, Hunter Salas, a top five recruit, fluctuating between top five and top 10. And I mean, the dude is just, I mean, he's an amazing player on the court. He's able to give it off to some great guys that he has behind him. St. Thomas is really, is growing as a prospect himself. Jalen Johnson, Jaden Johnson over at Miller North as well. Has just been able to do an amazing job. He's a D1 recruit, and he's kind of the third guy part of that team. And you look over at Bell West. I mean, Chucky Hepburn, the mental focus that this dude has, and the just overall willingness to not just have it himself. He doesn't always want to be the star. I mean, Chucky is easily the star. You see him as a person, and you don't really expect that out of him. He wants to get other guys involved. He wants to be a part of the community however he can and just be able to have a ton of fun playing high school basketball. But at the end of the day, it's business for him.
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, like Hepburn cares more about his team winning than he does, putting up a whole bunch of points or, helping his stats or anything like that. And, I think that's why he is such a high recruit. And, when he gets to Wisconsin, he might not put up the whole amount of points, but, if he gets all the way to the NBA, people are going to look at him and say, he's a winner. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to look for in him.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that kind of going with it. There's been some videos out there after they went out to the Council Bluffs Classic over there with some other games of him just fist bumping some fans, fist bumping some little girls, that just are awe inspired by this guy that is just an amazing player overall, and he's really just has that work ethic that so many guys not that they don't have, but a dude that is just not flustered by anything that's in front of him, and really is a guy that you really like to see just part of basketball.
So yeah, Miller North and Bellevue West did play in that Holiday Metro tournament that took place a couple weeks ago. And boy, oh boy, that was a pretty exciting game. Double overtime. Miller North's able to pull it out. St. Thomas set a school record for points in a game with 48. And I mean, if those two teams meet up again, I think we'll see more of the same in the state championship down in Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, you can see those guys going up against another two more times so far this season. It's going to be just amazing, especially with the possibility of having some fans coming back soon. We'll get to more of that later, but I mean, though that matchup, I was there for that one, and just at prep overall, and that great of a facility that they have. I mean, it was just an amazing game back and forth. I'll admit, I think when you see the two teams going back and forth, it really felt like Miller North had more of the upper advantage the entire game. But I think Bell West has and has continued to show that grit and unstoppability. They just they keep themselves into it. They keep themselves in it, and then all of a sudden they have a 3-point lead, and they're out in front momentum with them. And but I think overall in that game, surprisingly to me specifically, Miller North just really had a really good front court pressure. They're able to move it quick. They're able to find openings. But the fourth quarter is really where Bell West is really able to come into their own and make a name for what they've been doing. Chucky Hepburn, Frankie Filler have been doing an amazing job. They were really the main guys, working up in even in some of the paint that time. You saw, Chucky really able to get into open lanes, make easy layups, kick it out to the guys he needs to. I mean, you saw back and forth of both teams. The fourth quarter was really big for Bell West to even keep themselves, truly into it. Into it is a different term than what you see in most games. Into it, you'll see, for most teams is a 6, 7 point lead. or 7-point game. But when you see Bell West and Miller North, you got to keep yourself close. You got to keep yourself very close because momentum swings can turn a huge different tide in those kind of games. But Bell West did an amazing job in that fourth quarter to keep themselves into it. Of course, they weren't able to end up winning that game, of course, with Chucky fouling out. And then the rest of that game, it was just an amazing game all around. I mean, St. Thomas obviously got some more looks scholastically to where he wants to go next year. But, I mean, a 40-point performance by him. Miller North and Bell West are just easily the best two teams that we see here this year and maybe that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It'll definitely be interesting to see how those two teams match up as we continue to go through the season. So going down the list now, you got Creighton Prep at 3 and Omaha Central at 4. And a little bit about Omaha Central, like they lost a couple pieces to their team last year, but it seems like they're still, really solid and, a good solid team this year.
Yeah, and I saw with that. I mean, Latrell Reichel Jr. was really the main guy that we saw they lost last year.
Mhm.
And to me, I thought they would be somewhat a little more like Omaha South. They wouldn't drop quite as much as Omaha South has this year. But I didn't really see them being as much of a force in that top 10. They've been able to keep it close up against the guys like Miller North and Bell West. And they've been able to make themselves a name for in a lot of their games. I believe Central's 11-1 currently. And just overall as a team, they've worked really well as chemistry. They're a quick team. They're a knit and gritty team. That's really what you see from Central as a program overall, whether that's basketball, whether that's football, whether that's baseball. They're gonna make you fight for it. They want to win that game. They want to get that extra inch. They want to get that extra bucket in any way they can. And they do their business. They get onto what they want to do, and they get in your head. And that's really why they're such a great program, and they've continued to be a program ever since. That 3-time state championship a few years ago.
So I want to talk about Creighton Prep a little bit because they are also having a really good season. Only one loss, I believe, on the year, and that was to Bellevue West, and it was, I mean, only by 9, so that's pretty good. And you got Luke Jungers and Brendan Buckley both averaging over 11 points per game. And so I think they're another team that could maybe give Miller North or Bellevue West a run for their money, especially after how I saw them, kind of stay in it with Bellevue West in that holiday tournament.
Yeah, easy. I mean, even as a 3 seed, there's someone as a dark horse going against teams like Bell West and Miller North. But I think really the guys. I mean, Luke Jungers, of course, is a really big performer for Creighton Prep. I think the guy you really want to see is Justin City for them. He's had a great year so far. He's really been able to dish out to guys as well. And this is another team that's really a team built team. You don't really see guys in there that like Chucky Hepburn or Frankie Fiddler or Hunter Sallis to where they are the guy. They are the main stars that you see each night. It's really a team atmosphere that I've seen from Creighton Prep. It's a totally different team that you saw from last year. Along with Justin City, a guy you want to see a lot just overall in the paint that can push up numbers up against guys like Frankie Fiddler is AJ Rollins. Of course, a tight end commit going to Nebraska, not going to play basketball. Once he gets to college, dang, I mean, the dude is a big piece in the paint. He had 15 rebounds up against the West Side in that quarterfinals, had another 11 in that semifinals. And when he's able to go up against guys that don't quite have his size, it's a done deal for him. We saw, like I saw in that West Side game. I mean, Tate Advati is a guy at 6'4". He has a good, size on him. But overall, that the West Side team didn't really have that physicality that AJ Rollins has to be able to get those many rebounds. And that's why, Creighton Prep was able to come back from a 19-point lead in that quarterfinal matchup to be able to get themselves to the semifinals. Of course, they weren't able to move on to the finals, but I mean, there's a lot of interesting parts of this Creighton Prep team. They're somewhat of a dark horse going into here, even just as a 3 seed.
Yeah, and it's crazy to say, like you said, that a 3 seed is a kind of a dark horse, but that's just how kind of much Miller North and Bellevue West have separated themselves this year. So now continuing to move down kind of this top 10, you got Lincoln Pius and Lincoln Southeast, two Lincoln teams. They did start a little later, but now they're really showing their stuff. Pius only one loss, and that was to Bellevue West as well on this past Tuesday, and it was close there for a bit, but then Bellevue West kind of did their thing, pulled away. And then Pius was able to beat Lincoln Southeast, who is the number 6 seed. So do you see what have you been seeing from Pius more this year?
Well, overall, I mean, the Heartland Conference is kind of been confusing to watch because you've seen, they go up against a lot of guys that are the same. You go up a lot against a lot of teams that are a little bit lower. You got guys like Lincoln Southwest, you got, Norfolk, you got Columbus, you got Grand Island. Not that Grand Island is a bad team. I mean, they're of course a top 10 team. But I talked a lot last year, kind of overall as basketball that we saw. It was just a lot of parity. You saw a lot of parity in Class A basketball. So many teams going back and forth, jumping between the top 10, out of the top 10. And I think this is really the way it is once you get down to about 5, 6, and so on. You see a ton of parity. Um, I really have some struggles that I want to see with Pius. I mean, they started off 5-0. They had a great start of the season, but a lot of those games weren't up against great teams. I mean, Southeast has had its holes. They started off up against Lincoln Southwest, lost that first game. Of course, it's a little bit of rust to start it off with. But Pius, I mean, everything just seemed to just break down up against Bell West earlier this week on Tuesday. I believe it was 80. I'm checking it. Either 85 or 83 to 62 in that one. And Pius was really never able to just make that even a game. Bell West and Chucky Hepburn were able to have a huge outing that first half, and they just kept rolling into the second half. I don't really see Pius as a team, or really even Lincoln Southeast as a team that we're to see a lot of in conversations. I'm not even sure if they'll make state, to be honest with you. I think going forward, this is going to be a really Omaha Metro driven team or Class A. And I think Grand Island is the other team that can get into that mix. But yeah, there's a lot of on and off for those teams that you see, like Lincoln Pius and Lincoln Southeast. I have some more trouble with what the style of basketball they've been playing so far this season. But of course, we're only halfway. So there's a lot more improvement that we can see. Defensively is really where I think Lincoln Pius needs to work on. They're a quick team. They're a gritty team. We saw that last year. But they're also a very short team. So when you got guys like Frankie Fiddler that are 6'6" getting in the paint, it's easy for them to get easy layups and make it big buckets. And where you have that 3-point arc they're always relying on, when you can't hit it, I mean, it's not a sustainable style of basketball. As hard as it is to keep that, it's just not a sustainable style of basketball to work with.
Well, yeah, like you said, like it just seems like there's so many like really good Omaha Metro teams this year, and the domination does come from the Metro, and it just seems like Lincoln is just behind from where the Metro is right now, because it feels like you got Miller North and Bellevue West, but there's a lot of good competitive teams in the Metro area.
Yeah, I mean, you see Creighton Prep, you see Miller North, you see Bell West, you see Omaha Central. Um, I mean, these teams have just been able to, blow through easily most of the top 10 teams they've been able to compete against. Whether, some scares here and there, but they've been able to keep themselves in good games. They've only lost to each other actually in these games. But I think there's going to be a lot more stepping up that Lincoln Pius is going to have to do, as well as Lincoln Southeast, to show that they're true contenders and be able to make state once we get down the road.
So let's talk about West Side now a little bit. I know, from your school, their only losses have been to top 10 teams, so they've been looking pretty good. And if my stats are correct here, they got 4 players that are averaging over 10 points per game. So it just seems like they're kind of sharing the ball. Is that what you've seen from the success from the Warriors this year?
Yeah, I mean, we got Westside overall, as I'm gonna check again. I believe 7 guys. Yeah, 7 guys that have played over 10 minutes averaging in all their games. The odd thing here is that this team is not senior led whatsoever. You have 3 seniors on the team. Both are guys or all 3 of them are guys that usually get in some later time, garbage time a little bit when they come in. This team is almost all juniors, as well as all freshmen. You see Chandler Meeks, which I there's a lot of back and forth to what you want to say, about Chandler Meeks of where he deserves to go. I believe Chandler Meeks is easily the most underrated guy that you're going to see in Class A. Plain and simple. There's so much a part of his game that I don't understand how a single program wouldn't want this dude. I mean, he comes up to me, after games and stuff like that, sees how we're doing, sees what I thought in the game, what he can work on, and just seeing how we're doing just as a journalism program as well with what we're doing. And he's really just an amazing leader on the court as well. I mean, the guy, he doesn't take anybody for granted in any way, whether that's a teammate, whether that's a different team, or whether that's just a person in the hallway. I mean, he sees every guy as another guy he can make friends with, and just become a more perspective person as overall. On the court specifically, he's easily one of the only guys that I've really seen out of a top 5 team that's been able to shut down some of the top guys in the state. I've seen him go up against Hunter Salas and Chucky Hepburn. I think he's had a really good outing with them. The only time he ever gets somewhat off is when he gets in foul trouble, which with a lot of ticky-tack fouls that you see in high school basketball, sometimes that can be a problem. Chandler Meeks has jumped up 12.9 points per game so far this season. He's really been doing a great job overall on the offensive side of the ball, and he's really been boosting it up. We talked to him kind of about some of the criticisms with the overall team. Of course, it's a comparatively short team. You only have one guy that's over 6'5", which is Logan Wilson, who's 6'6", who surprisingly works around the perimeter more than you'd see him in the paint. And kind of how he felt, what they needed to do to show that they can surpass some of these top teams. His biggest point, Chandler's biggest point in this was ball movement. Ball movement was the biggest point that they want to work towards. You saw, with Westside last year, you saw Carl Brown and PJ Nagami and Jaden Booth, all, big seniors they have lost this season. That style of offense, especially at home court, when you have, you have 5 feet less, you have another 5 feet less than you're going to see from any other court. It's a lot quicker style in transition. There needs to be a lot more ability to finish when they need to, and to finish in sometimes uncomfortable positions, uncomfortable shots that they got to make in big moments to be able to make sure they have that momentum, they ride that momentum well, and then make sure that they play all 32 minutes. Another criticism kind of going towards them, of course, was that prep game. A 19-point lead going into about halfway left in the second quarter, 25-9. 25-4. In that one. And overall, I mean, Westside was just dominating in that first half. This game seemed like it was over, like it was last year, to where Jade Booth was putting up 12 threes, and the team was just hooking on all cylinders. The second half of that second quarter was flat out a disaster. AJ Rollins, I believe, at 11 points in that second quarter, had another ridiculous amount of rebounds, and the team just felt not quite whole. We saw that in the Miller North game as well. They had a good lead. They thought, hey, this is the big giant. We got an opportunity up against this big team. We're beating them. We can beat them. We can beat them. We can beat them. And the second quarter was a little slow. It kept close. But going into halftime, there's a lot of guys that didn't know quite what to feel. Then trying to rush it too much to stranglehold on Miller North, because we need to put the stomp down now, and making some contested shots or not so smart shots that they should be really working around towards. But I think going forward, this team is going to be interesting to see. Tate Advati is a transfer from Elkhorn South, sophomore this season. You see CJ Mitchell, Caleb Benning, number 2 rated freshman in Class A, in the state this season. And I think overall, this team is going to be interesting to watch for. I think with Chucky gone and a lot of the great guys out of Prep, Prep is almost all seniors. Bell West is almost all seniors. Miller North is almost all seniors. When you see starting guys that have experience, I think this West Side team, going down the road, going into next season, don't quote me here. Of course, I can be biased going with this, but I think West Side is really going to be a top 5 team, a top 3 team when we get into next year. You have an amazing going to be senior class next year, an amazing sophomore class going into next year. The junior class is really where it's getting iffy. So far, there's only one current sophomore going to be a junior next season. That is even up to JV. So we've seen really from this current sophomore class at Westside that they've really struggled overall to show kind of their wealth, not just in basketball, really just sports as a whole, or athletics as a whole at the school. But I think Westside this season is going to be a struggle for them to show that they're truly a contender. I think they're going to be a team that can make some dark horse noise, that can, when they put it all together, it's going to be a great style of basketball. They're going to be able to they need to put up some top 10 wins to get some more respect. I think a Papillion La Vista game on Tuesday will help them with that. I think a possible opportunity up against Millard West later this season will be an opportunity with that. Papillion La Vista South will be another opportunity with that. But I think Westside really needs to solidify some top 10 wins before they can really look down the road to see where they want to be and where they want to push when it comes to districts and state.
Well, like you said, it just feels like Westside is right there, because they, like you said, they were up against Miller North, they were up big against Creighton Prep, but then just, weren't able to hold on to that for the full 32. And so it just feels like if they can figure that out, they're going to be a team that's hard to beat. And I definitely agree that they'll be one of those top teams.
Yeah, and
Next year.
looking at last year, it could even be a problem. We saw Omaha Central, Omaha South were two big games where they had the momentum hugely in the third quarter. Fourth quarter meltdowns happened up against Omaha Central. They had a 7-point lead going into the end of the third quarter up against Central last year. Omaha South was a game that looked just way out that Omaha South was never going to come back to, even though it was comparatively points wise still a close game. But last year we saw the momentum way on West side for the first half. Then we saw Omaha South keep creeping back in that one, and then of course at the end of the ball game, West Side wasn't able to keep to it, and I think that's really been a story for them. It's just being able to play all 32 minutes, being able to play sustainable basketball for all 32 minutes, and then just really putting everything together to the point that they play true basketball and to their potential.
Yeah, so it'll definitely be interesting to see if they can make any noise come getting to Lincoln time. So rounding out the rest of the top 10, you got both Papio teams, and then Grand Island. I did want to talk about Papio South here because this is a team that they've played a lot of really good teams. They've lost to Omaha Central twice, which the first time they only lost by one. The second time it was an overtime game, but then losing to Benson, losing to Bell West, and losing to Miller North. I mean, that's a really tough like 4 set of games right there. But it just feels like even though they have 5 losses, they're still a pretty solid team because I mean you've seen them be in it close with Central. Bellevue West was kind of a blowout, Miller North a little bit of a blowout, but they lost close to Benson. But it's been a really tough schedule so far for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, we really saw Papillion La Vista South, kind of what we saw in Miller North in football so far this season. I mean, they have a stacked schedule overall, some great teams they've went up against, and they had a really strong first 4 games. They went 4-0. They beat some lower class teams. They beat Omaha Bryan by a huge number. They beat Millard South by a huge number. They beat Kearney by a huge number. They beat South Sioux City by an even larger number, 50-point victory in that one. But Papio South's just been really confusing to me overall as a team. Both Papio and Papio South have been somewhat confusing when you get look at their stats and look at their team overall. I mean, they've worked well beyond the 3-point line. But they've really struggled defensively when you see teams that have been able to exploit some of their weaknesses overall. And we saw that with Bell West. We saw that with Omaha Central twice. But Papio South's really never truly been out of it in a lot of their games. But I think going forward, just seeing how they can do up against teams like Westside going forward, seeing how they're going to do up against, Millard West, either tomorrow night or if that ends up becoming rescheduled. There's a lot of opportunities for them to keep getting better and to keep growing. They play prep again as well. But these top 10 games going down the stretch, I think are really going to show if Papio South could really be a contender.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see. So before we move on to our kind of games to watch for this next week, are there any teams outside of the top 10 that you don't necessarily think could like make a state title run, but could be considered in that top 10?
That's a really good question. I don't really think so, to be honest with you. I think there's some opportunities for some schools to make some big names in districts and maybe put some upsets to some of the like 6 or 5 or 6 guys like Papio South. I really like, I guess last week, if I were to say it, I guess Grand Island easily would have been my team. You see Trout over there who's really been commanding that overall offense. And we don't really see, really in any sports, Grand Island and Kearney seem to be, they're way off in the Heartland Conference, and we get guys like in the Omaha Metro. We don't really see them that much. We don't really see their style of basketball sometimes because they don't play as many Omaha Metro teams that have shown dominance these last few years. And I think Grand Island could easily make some noise in districts. It could upset some teams and push away some dreams that some teams are having. Of course, we have that 7 district schedule with an 8th wild card. It's going to be interesting coming that 7, 8, 9 area to what we're going to see going down the stretch.
Look, I'm gonna be called a homer for this, but you and I talked before we start, but I just like I said, I don't think that they're gonna make a big run. I think it'll be tough for them to get to state, but I really like what I've been seeing from Miller West. I have seen them a lot, them being my own school, but I think Evan Meyersick doesn't get talked about as being kind of he doesn't put up a lot of points. He averages 15 per game and 6.5 rebounds per game, but he's just been so consistent for the Wildcats, gets it done. They have a really good 3-point shooter in Ryan Larson. Dominic Hum, I think he's improved his game so much at that guard position. And then James Conway, who's all Nebraska State linebacker in football, but he's been really solid, averaging 11 points, over 7 rebounds for the Wildcats. And they've beat who they're supposed to be. Other than that Omaha North game. But then you lost by 2 to Creighton Prep. You were tied with Bellevue West at halftime. Of course, ended up losing by 13. But I'm a homer, I know, but I like where Miller West is at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you that too. I mean, Miller West does have a really solid style of offense going forward, but it's one of those teams to where when you go up against teams with size, it can be a lacking, and you see teams that get out to big leads in that third quarter. It's hard for them to stop momentum runs. That's really why I feel it's going to be hard for them to really make some noise in districts. I just don't feel Miller West overall has that factor to really make a big name up against some of the top teams. I think if you see pairings like Papio or Papio South or Grand Island, or possibly Lincoln Southeast or Lincoln Pius being mixed with Miller West, I think that can be a really good opportunity for them to get some wins. I think if you look with Lincoln Pius going up against Miller West, that would be an interesting game. I think that would be a great game going back and forth. And I think that's a really evenly matched game, as although the deemed rankings are somewhat different.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look at some of the games to watch over this next week. So we were actually supposed to have a really good three-game series here tomorrow, but of course Papio and Westside was already canceled. But as of now, I believe still on Papio South versus Millard West should be pretty solid. And then Millard North and Central. I mean, even if they end up rescheduling it, I'm going to be really interested to see how those two teams match up.
Yeah, I've been looking on Twitter a little bit. Of course, that West Side Papio game is going to be moved to Tuesday. That Millard North game, I believe, has just still been up in the air, as well as that Millard West game, if that game is going to be canceled or not, with school and everything getting canceled tomorrow, or being somewhat e-learning for some groups. That Millard North Central matchup is going to be a great one. I think we saw that last year with how good those teams were. But I think Central has a really great team this year. They've been able to bolster some of their senior losses from last year. But losing a guy like Latrell Reichel that they had last season is just going to be really hard for them to be able to make some big noise up against Millard North this season. I think it's going to be an interesting one to see of how they go back and forth. I have a hard time seeing Central being able to overpower a team like Millard North, but I think this one's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I just think overall, just Millard North just has the firepower on offense that other teams just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the Omaha Central Millard North game last year at Millard North, and it ended up going to overtime, and Max Polk laid up a last second layup to beat Millard North after Hunter Salas had made a jumper to tie the game and send it to overtime. And just looking back on it, first of all, makes me miss fans. But second of all, I feel like this could be a really good game, even without Latrell Reichel. I think it could still be really solid.
Yeah. So the Heartland, so we've talked about the Heartland Conference. Pius able to, I believe, Pius able to take down in that one. Both Pius boys and girls were able to win down there. Going forward, of course, over break, we talked about the Heartland Hoops Classic that's going on over February 12th and 13th. It's going to be some great basketball. We saw Millard North go up against IMG last season. Now we're going to see Oak Hill going up against Millard North this season, and then Sunrise Christian, one of the top schools in the nation, going up against Bellevue West. I mean, these are going to be some great games. Oak Hill and Sunrise Christian, of course, top 10, or it's, I believe, top 5 as the last week on Max Preps, at least. Top 5 teams going back and forth with some of the top West or Nebraska teams. And then February 12th, we're going to see at Hastings College, another great matchup, a top 10 matchup in the nation between those two teams. A little bit of a precursor to what we might see on that Saturday overall.
Yeah, it should be really interesting to see all that. So, any other games you're looking forward to in this next week?
I think it'll be interesting to see what we got to go with. I think that some big games for some teams to win. I mean, Middle North, that Central game is going to be a really one big one to see how Papio South favors up against some different teams that they haven't seen so much this season. And then I think somewhat of Benson. I think some of those opponents. Benson is just such a team that goes on and off with a couple of their guys. They have some really talented guys on their team, but going back and forth, they have some meltdowns. They have some small issues and unable to beat some teams that I feel they can beat.
Yeah, it should be good. We've had a lot of great action here in Class A. We hope to be doing this a little more often for you guys, breaking down everything going on in the state basketball wise. So, yeah, we'd like to thank you guys for joining us this time. We'll hopefully see you next time.